is Melissa Carter. I am the writer and publisher at Wanging Dude Publishing. That is my publishing house, and I am writing my first long form book. I have a children's book out called Whale of an Idea, but my first long form nonfiction memoir is going to be coming out in spring of 25. And one of the thoughts I had about writing that I wanted to share, and sometimes it's hard, and that is that you don't have to include every single story or everything you come up with. So I've mentioned before, if you're new to the channel, that for me, the writing process to begin with is just kind of vomit on the page, get all those thoughts out on the page. Because I do think that you can talk yourself out of writing, or you can kind of, I don't know, stumble along if you try to edit as you write. So just write, knowing it's not going to be perfect. You're not going to sit and write the perfect novel or the perfect memoir or whatever it is you're writing as you're writing it. Like you have to go through the process of writing it again or, kind of cleaning it up. But I believe in the first draft, the first efforts, you just throw everything you can at the page that's coming in your mind, because you don't want to lose it, is kind of the point. So in writing a memoir, what I'm doing is I'm telling my story. So I know these stories very well. I'm not having to make up any fictional storyline. But the issue with doing nonfiction work and to do these is that you have to make sure, though, there is a story involved and that it is a flow and that it makes sense for the reader. Because, I've said before, I do think writing is a flow. It's whether it's music flow or river flow, but there's a energy to reading. And sometimes the best things you read are the ones that you can't put it down. You've heard that before, right? I couldn't put it down because I wanted to keep going with the story. Now, if you make it difficult for them to read it, if it doesn't make sense, there's not a good flow, there's an interruption in flow, that's, as a reader, when you kind of get frustrated, because what track am I on? Where does my mind need to be? So don't assume that your readers are mind readers and know exactly what you're trying to say. You have to say it correctly. So with that in mind, with the memoir, sometimes it was difficult. And I've mentioned this before too. It was difficult to go through some of these experiences again, because they were highly charged with worry, with anxiety. My memoir has to do with my health and my health issues over time. And I found that when I was writing about them, I would adopt those feelings all over again. Even though they were years in the past, it would just trigger a reaction. And sometimes it was difficult. So after I had put everything on the page, all the stories, some of them didn't fit. So I would write and then print in a binder and go over it and printed it many times. Sorry, Mother Earth, I did recycle all the ones I threw away. But I would find that some of these stories didn't fit. So even after going through the process of kind of digging those out of my soul and putting them on the page, it's like, oh, well, it doesn't flow. It doesn't have anything to do with my health, or this really didn't fit, or I don't know. It has to be taken out. And sometimes it's really hard to put that X through that segment. But that's the other thing, is just because you wrote it doesn't mean that you need to include it. And you have to give yourself permission to let that go, and not be too attached to everything. Now, if I'm telling my story, I'm obviously very attached to all that I'm putting in the book. But at the same time, a book, in my view, is for the reader. It is for their entertainment or their education. And I think that's where your ego comes into play. It's like, oh, but I want them to feel this. Well, no, the reader needs to feel whatever they need to feel, and you just present it to them. So it's a kind of an ego wrestling match that you go through sometimes, especially if you're telling your own story. But I'm assuming with fiction, it would be the same way, because you've created these characters and they're your babies, and they're like, oh, but they're going through this and I need to include that. But at the same time, it's a relationship between you and the reader. That book is kind of your contract with each other. You're going to spend time together, and you're going to hopefully get out of that time together with something positive. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to let it go. I'm not going to sing it, but you have to let it go. So I've said before, we're going to talk to a book editor about this process, because I think that if you're especially going to self-publish, you've got to let somebody else take a look at your work for this very reason. Because they are the ones that not only are going to spell check you, but also you need someone to give you the tough love is, I don't understand what happened here. I don't understand what happened here. And I know other authors and screenwriters who are a part of a group where they give each other that feedback. I've also heard too, if you are someone who doesn't really want to be a part of a group or be in the same room when someone is critiquing you, what you can do is send it to friends, several, or people you trust, and have them send it back to you anonymously or with their names on it, whatever you're comfortable with, and let them do that. Let them say, okay, give them like I don't know, some kind of legend where they can, have a letter for, I don't understand this, or, this doesn't make sense. This really did affect me and I really enjoyed this segment. But you can have other people need to read your work. And that's the hardest thing, is to have that happen. I did not send this manuscript to friends. I did not send this manuscript to loved ones. Nobody knew I was writing this until now. So so people are part of the YouTube channel. You're not the last in line. There are loved ones who were like, you were doing what? And you didn't tell me about this. But I am one of those people who, I'm creative, but I'm also sensitive. And so I have to keep that in check. But I was much more comfortable in being solitary in writing this. But because of that, to reiterate this point before I end the video, you've got to have somebody else look at your work, because sometimes when you're that close to it, you may not be able to say to yourself, this segment has to go. For me, I was able to say several times, yes, I put a day's work or 2 days work into a portion of the book, and then it ended up not making it in there. And I did that before I ever sent it to the editor, who was also going to give that feedback. So you have to understand that it's okay for something not to be included, because if it makes better sense to the reader for it not to be in there, then that's all right. You can keep that segment in your heart forever. Please subscribe if you're interested in following along on the journey of publishing a book. I would love your feedback. Tell me about your writing style, and maybe some stories about how, oh, let me tell you what happened when I sent this to a friend or an editor, or let me tell you why I'm afraid to do something like that. You can leave it in the comments below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.